Welcome to the Sheff United Way. My name is Hal. You'll soon see the face of In Good Nick. And on this video, we're talking about the Sheffield United accounts from the 2020-21 season. They have been published. And to give us a breakdown, we welcome back accountant and Blades fan, Darren Smith. Darren, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for asking me back. I can't believe it's a year since we did this all once before. So
I know it really has flown by. What would you say to kick us off is the headline takeaway from these accounts?
Well, I think a lot of fans will have seen the headline numbers, and on the face of it, they'll have said, "Oh, I'm quite surprised that we've actually made a second year of profits." Obviously, the second year was the year that we were very poor on the pitch and we were relegated. And it was also the year that none of us were able to actually go and watch the games, and we all watched the games through you guys on your forum. So, but that probably didn't give much matchday income to Sheffield United. So I think on the face of it, people are probably surprised that we actually made a profit, and they're probably then surprised to find that people are talking about debt and having to sell players. So hopefully we'll use this time to try and reconcile how we can make a profit, but still need to look at the cash flow of the business quite closely.
My first question for you, Darren, is how much was the playing budget?
You've come in really with one that's quite a complicated question, to be honest with you, Nick. So
I'm a complicated guy, Darren.
A lot of fans really focus on, which is does Sheffield United pay the wage bill that they need to be competitive in the Premier League? And it's probably the crux of a lot of the discussion back and forth about the finances. So in terms of last year, one of the complications we had a little bit was that because the previous season was extended, we also extended the accounts. So the previous year's accounts were for 13 months and this year's were for 11 months. Obviously, we paid the salaries across the full 24 months equally. So really, to get a fair comparison, we should try and redo those on a 12 versus 12 months basis. If you do that, then the wage bill last year was £61.5 million. Now, it's not just the playing staff, that's everybody, but obviously the players are the highest paid people on the payroll. So it was £61 million. The previous year, it was nearly £72 million. So again, I think people will have been surprised by that drop in wages because obviously we signed bigger name players in terms of Brewster, Ramsdale. We signed Berger halfway through the first year. I think what actually the accounts are showing, though, is that the wage structure at Sheffield United is very much performance related. And obviously the first season, the players got quite a significant bonus for staying up. And in the second season, they failed to get any of those bonuses. So the way that I think Sheffield United budget on the start of the year is that they almost give the merit payments to do with league placing directly through to the players. So what you actually got then was the income dropped, but also the wages dropped. So when people look at it, they just need to bear in mind that if we'd have stayed up, the wage bill wouldn't have just been slightly higher, but it would have been significantly higher. Obviously, if they paid nearly 72 million the previous year, and all the players signed new contracts except Lundstrom, they weren't going to be signing for pay cuts. So you can imagine that the actual wage bill that they were expecting to pay if they'd have finished 17th was nearer 80 or 85 million pounds. So it is one of the misconceptions, really, of the numbers, that the wages really reflected the poor performance on the field. And I think most people would agree that structure is actually quite a sensible structure, that if the players do well, perform well, we generate more TV income, we generate more merit payments, bigger crowds, then the players are the ones that benefit from that. And that's the way the structure has been set up.
But you mentioned before that about the headline, the profit.
Yeah.
Would we not have been better off to spend, let's say, £10 million extra on wages? Because whilst you've said there that it isn't perhaps as insignificant as some people think, I'm pretty sure our wages are probably a lot less than many other top flight clubs. arguably across Europe. So maybe spending more on wages possibly could have given us more chance of staying up by being able to attract better players.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a fair argument. It's a balancing act, really. What people need to be careful about, though, is we paid us the salaries we paid were because we came 20th. If we'd have come 17th, basically the TV money would have been £6 million higher, because basically each league position generates £2 million. So, but like we just said, the players themselves, if we'd have stayed up, the players themselves would have probably earned another 20 or 25 million pounds. So the idea at the start of the year really wasn't to make a profit of 10 million pounds. If we'd have come 17th, basically all the profit we did make, plus their bonuses, would have probably meant that we would have only broken even, and that was the target, to break even. Now, so where you're in a position there is if someone had come along successfully and we'd have signed an Ollie Watkins or whoever, or signed an expensive loan player, and there'd have been the difference between 20th and 17th, all the other players would have obviously earned more. So it wouldn't have just been a gap of 10 million. It would have been, we'd have already been making a slight break even or loss with the current squad. That extra player would have then cost £10 million. Would you have got a game-changing player, or would you have needed 2 or 3 players to actually have kept us up last season? You'd have been looking at probably a 20 or 25 million pound loss if we'd have gone out and signed, say, 2 or 3 players, or even one marquee player with a big transfer fee. So then people will go, well, surely better to lose 20 million than it is to lose 40 or 50 million in TV money. But the problem you've got is, if you do that this season to stay up, do you do that next season? Do you do that the season after? Do you do that? You can't really. The owners have been very honest. They want a sustainable club, and if Sheffield United can't sustain itself in the Premier League, it's not actually going to generate more income than it is generating now. So this is the time where it has to generate enough income to survive. So whether there is an argument that we should have spent more just because we were maintaining early years of Premier League and then we maybe fell away after 3 years, 3, 4, 5 and 6, I think that's a valid argument. You may argue that other clubs have shown that's the way to go, that once you have players playing in the Premier League, you can sell players as well as you can buy players, and we were still in the investment mode. But it isn't just as simple as, yeah, let's spend another 10 million quid, we'd have stayed up and broken even, because there's other complications in that as well.
Made some really interesting points there, Darren. So reports have suggested that the wage budget was somewhere in the region of 63 million. How does that compare to other clubs? For example, the next lowest in the top flight was Brighton at 109 million.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it goes back a bit to the point we said before. Brighton probably have a similar structure to ours, whereby they'll have triggered the staying up bonuses, and we didn't. So you've got to bear in mind. I think if we'd have finished 17th and Brighton had finished 16th, the gap wouldn't probably be as much as 40 million as it seems on the face of it. I don't think all the Premier League clubs have actually reported yet. So although Brighton might be showing second lowest, I'm not sure if other clubs have all reported. I think Burnley might be somewhere in between as well. But yeah, we were definitely bottom 2, 3, if not bottom on wage budget. The thing that you've got to be careful of, though, and it comes back to what profits actually are. We have gone down a route at the moment of basically we paid quite a lot in transfer fees, and we paid quite modest wages. If you look at Brighton, I don't know Brighton inside out, but I can't recall Brighton spending £20 million on a transfer fee. I think Pommpey might be their most expensive, and he was a little bit lower than that. Now, we spent 3 times £20 million. And we'll probably come on to this later, that transfer fees are reflected slightly differently. But we could have easily gone down a route and signed more experienced players on less transfer fees with probably less of a resale value, but probably put more into our wages budget. And as a club, I don't think anyone in particular is responsible for that, but as a club, we decided to spend on younger players with potential and less so on players at the end of their careers that were on bigger wages. You look at Brighton, they signed somebody like Danny Welbeck. That's a transfer that we were just not contemplating really last season. So we could have actually spent less on transfer fees, on more on wages, and close that gap. And it was a policy, I think, I think what we've got to get used to, though, is it's either one or the other and not both. And you look at most Premier League clubs, their net spend on transfers is actually quite low because they're selling players and reinvesting. We were not selling anybody and only buying players, and that makes it difficult to then pay quite a significant wage bill as well.
Yeah, so do we still spread the cost of transfers?
Yeah, so this is probably the crux of the understanding the accounts and understanding some of the other issues that have come out of the accounts, like the fact that we've taken out loans and that we're talking about selling players. I think a lot of fans look at it and say, well, we've made a profit. Why are we in that situation? And I think what you've got to be careful about is that the profit really is there to reflect the day-to-day trading of the business. It's the income, less the wages, less the overheads. To one side, then, you're looking at the players and the transfer fees. And what happens is they treat football like any other business, really. If you bought a car or a building, you're saying, look, we're not getting the value out of that asset today and only today. We're getting it over 4 or 5 years. And that's how we treat footballers and transfer fees. So I don't want to get too technical, but if we take Brewster, signed for, it's been reported, £20 million minimum, 5-year contract. What we'll do is he'll spread the cost of that £20 million over 5 years. So in the year that we're talking about, only £4 million of that cost has actually been reflected in that profit. So it's a key difference between, yes, we're making profit on day-to-day activity, but we're also spreading these transfer fees over 4 or 5 years. And if you stay in the Premier League, that's not too big of a problem. And if you sell these players for as much as you buy them, or hopefully even more, that's not a problem either. The problem we've got is that we actually, if you actually take into account transfer fees and the profit and loss account, we actually made quite a big deficit rather than the surplus that it appears on the face of it. And that's the difficulty we've now got as we come into this season after relegation.
Yeah, and one of the things, of course, to consider is you've mentioned your thoughts on how much we pay for various players. You've given one example there. You've previously mentioned a figure of £114 million. Is this the kind of initial fee, or is this if they hit various performance-related landmarks? And do you know what any of these are?
Yeah, so what happened was that in the 2 seasons in the Premier League, we've committed to spending in transfer fees £114 million. On top of that, there's variables that may add to that cost of about £14 million. At one point, that figure would have actually been higher, but some of those variables will have drifted away because we got relegated. A big part of the variables will have been that we stayed up. But even as at the end of the relegation, we still potentially need to pay another 14 million on top of that 114 million for things like performance in terms of appearances, whether we go back up, add-ons for transfers to other clubs and things like that. So, but let's just say none of those variables come about. We've actually committed to spending £114 million on transfers. I think in the year that we're actually talking about, I think we spent about 46 million. So most of it was in that first 2 windows of the first season, and then we had a quite an expensive first window of last season, and then obviously we spent nothing in the January. Now, to put that in perspective, then, so that 114 million. Because of this aging of the contract, so Ollie McBurney, we've had him 2 years, so 2 years of his fee have come through. We've had Berger, he'd had like 1.5 years, Brewster only 1 year. So far in the accounts, we'd only reflected £42 million of that £114 million through what they call the profit and loss account. That gap, that £70 million, has not been reflected through the profit and loss account. yet. That will come through this year, next year, year after. So that's the bit that we've actually spent a lot more. If you're just talking cash, we've actually spent a lot more than we've actually generated when you start to take transfer fees in. So, but then to be clear, now we're talking cash, not all of that £140 million had to be paid on day one. A lot of transfer fees now, you see the headline figure, but the actual fees are paid in instalments. So of the £114 million, we've not actually paid yet £36 million of that. So, and the way that was spread is that there was £18 million of that due this year that we're currently in, and £18 million after that. So we, in theory, committed to spending £114 million on transfer fees. We've actually only spent something like, what will it be? £78 million we've actually spent hard cash. And of that, we've only actually reflected £42 million through the profit and loss account. So I apologise. I don't mean to throw a lot of numbers at your viewers. And if they're ironing or listening to this while they're running or something like that, they're probably getting a bit lost here. But it's that difference. It's 42 million has gone through the P&L, of which we made a profit. On top of that, we've got another 30 odd million that we paid for hard cash that is not reflected in the P&L. And we've got 36 million pounds of transfer fees we can't get out of, but we've not actually yet paid as at those accounts. And it's that last bit. It's the fact that we spent more than we earned, and we spent money that we've not yet paid out, that is then causing the issues that we're going to have coming into this season and next season.
You touched on the performance criteria, and I'd like to talk about the Ramsdale sale, because I don't think any of us actually realised that Ramsdale was first of all going to get into the team at Arsenal, but also Arsenal do so well. So he must be ticking a lot of boxes when it comes to kind of appearances and maybe even Arsenal getting towards the Champions League. Do you know any of the performance criteria in that sale?
Well, actually, I mean, the Ramsdale sale actually came after these accounts, so we've not had the benefit of that through these accounts, and that will obviously have been a big reason why we sold him, which was to make back this deficit. So, for argument's sake, his fee will probably pay towards these instalments of the fees that we've not yet paid in the previous year. In terms of the disclosure in the accounts, we don't really disclose individual players. So, when we've signed players last season, we know they cost 46 million, but we don't know the split between Brewster, Bogle, Lowe, Ramsdale, and Burke, I think it was. If you actually use a little bit of deduction, it suggests that the Ramsdale purchase was about 15.5 to 16 million in those accounts. However, they had an add-on for profit on his sale, of which we will have obviously made a profit. So it's not in the accounts yet, but I can tell you that we actually sold him for a guaranteed 24 million, rising to 30 million on variables. There's been a little bit of a misunderstanding of variables because there was a lot of negotiation back and forth where we locked ourselves away. My understanding is that the variables are all appearance based, but we're already going to be starting to get into those variables this season because, like you say, it was all expected probably by both sides they would sit on the bench this year and actually not start to generate the variables till the second year, whereas he's actually become a regular. So I think the club themselves are budgeting to only receive £24 million, but it looks like there's a good opportunity here that we're probably going to get the full 30 million. But just as I was talking about the instalments, one of the loans that we've had to take out this year has been because Arsenal did not pay us that £24 million up front. It was actually spread over, I think it was 3 years or 4 years even. No, it was 3 years. So on day one, we'll have only probably got about £8 million for that fee. But what we can do is, because we know we're going to get £24 million, we can go out to the market and borrow against the balance of his fees. So if I said to you, we were due to pay about £80 million in fees, you can see that there's a good valid reason why we would say, right, well, 8 million would cover it. let's borrow some money against the future fees to pay off the fees that we're due to get to pay off this year, because there's a good chance by the time we get the money from the Ramsdale sale for years 2 and 3, we're probably spending less money in the transfer market, unless hopefully we go back up.
Am I right in thinking, Darren, that the bigger clubs with more money do pay up front?
No, not necessarily. I don't think it's. I think what you find is football transfers are made very simplistic when you read them in the newspaper. They just say that this fella's going for 20 million quid, or this fella's going for 25 million quid. The instalments that they're paid in can be quite a significant part of that, because, okay, if you get less up front and you can survive like that, that's fine. You might actually ask for a bigger absolute fee. If you need the money today, you might actually say, right, well, we'll accept 15 million or 16 million if they're going to pay 80% of it up front. It's worth it, because if you do borrow against it, there is interest to pay. So if Sheffield United have actually borrowed against future fee, what will actually happen is his fee will be 24 million. We'll probably pay about 4 or 5 million in interest. So we've effectively only cleared 20 million. We could have gone to Arsenal and said, look, can we have 20 million, but can we have it all up front? And fans might have looked at that and said, well, we've undersold him. We could have sold him for more money. But a lot of it is to do with the value of money and how quickly you get it in. Manchester City, obviously, are very good payers. They tend to pay their transfer fees up front. If I'm honest, I actually think I'm surprised that Sheffield United have paid as much as they have up front. For us to have paid 114 million and only have deferred 36 million, that suggests to me that we really struggle to get 1 or 2 of our targets over the line.
I think you might be right. And, we haven't had the kind of player sales that perhaps some of us would have expected. We've talked about Aaron Ramsdale, but as you say, that's going to be reflected next year in those accounts. But what kind of impact has the lack of player sales actually had? And I think I know where you're going to go with this.
Well, I mean, I suppose that comes down to more about a bit of a guessing game of how this year's accounts are going to be. So basically, we earned just over £100 million in TV money in the second season. That was 28 million down on the previous season. And the difference obviously was because we finished 20th instead of 9th, and the merit payments were lower. In the Championship, you're going to be looking at a parachute payment of about £55 million. So we've obviously got a £45 million deficit to overcome there. The player wages, we said, were probably 60 million. There will be relegation clauses in those. Whether they're as much as 50% or maybe it's 40%, even 30%, we don't know yet. But even if you said it was 40%, it's still not going to cover the whole reduction in income. So there's an element of we need to sell players to reduce the wage bill. We need to sell players to basically make sure that we are breaking even on day-to-day activity. But we also need to sell players to pay back these loans that we took out while we were in the Premier League. And we've not touched on one of the main loans was because we had this deficit between the profit and loss and what we actually spent. We actually took out a £30 million loan in the Premier League season. And this is one of the bits that it's hard to get your head around how you make a profit and need to borrow money. But that was one of the key variables last year. We took out a £23 million loan the year before on buying the assets back. We took a £30 million out to pay for transfer fees last season. And like I say, we owe £36 million on transfer fees. We're not going to generate enough income in the Championship to pay those loans back. Now, we may be able to restructure some of those loans, a bit like you do a mortgage or something. We might be able to put the loans over 10, 15, 20 years. But as it stood, we had quite a big deficit in terms of the income that we would bring in this season. We might be able to cover our day-to-day activity. We might be able to recover the lower wages, but we still had this big lump of loans that we needed to cover. And that's why you probably have seen in the press after the year end that we've taken out various loans against future income to really make up that difference. The alternative, obviously, is sell players. If you sell players, you recover those loans. We could have maybe sold Berger, hopefully for 30 million, paid the loan back. That's what clubs who get relegated normally do. If you look at when Norwich were relegated, I think they made about a £48 million profit on players. When Bournemouth were relegated, they made nearly £80 million profit on players. The yo-yo clubs have done that quite successfully and then got promoted. Unfortunately for us, we sold one player who had cost us with the add-ons 18 million and only got 24 million back for him, and sold nobody else. We got nothing back for Brewster, we got nothing back for Berger, we didn't sell any of the young players. You'd hope that in that scenario, okay, we've not balanced the books, but we put a squad on the pitch that should really be much better than Championship level. And unfortunately, with for whatever reasons, probably plenty of reasons, unlike the Norwiches and Bournemouths and Fulhams, we've not got straight back, and that's the dilemma really. The longer that happens, the more pressure is going to be on us to move these players on, to pay these loans back before the parachute payments disappear.
So should supporters be worried about these financial loans?
Well, it does. It's not a loans in themselves are not actually a bad thing. There's what you would genuinely call good loans and bad loans. If you've taken out a loan on your house, I don't think you look at that as being a bad thing. You know you have to generate enough money to pay it back, but you've got an asset there. In theory, the loan we took out for £30 million was backed by a playing squad that you would say is worth a lot more than £30 million. You'd hope so, because we paid that out in transfer fees. So everything we've got is backed by value in the club, be it assets, be it the hotel, be it the academy, the ground, and the players. The balancing act is we could probably sell all our squad and clear our loans, but then what would we be left with on the pitch? And the best
I can play.
Yeah. I've seen your penalties, Nick. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? The best way to clear these loans is to get promoted as soon as you possibly can, and certainly before you hit that cliff edge. And it is a cliff edge when you lose the parachute payments. So we're trying to do a balancing act. Yes, we sold Ramsdale, but also, although we didn't sign players, we signed 4 very expensive loans. Probably spent more on loans than any other team in the Championship could have done, other than Fulham. They were all on Premiership wages that we were covering fully. So we are trying to have a competitive side on the pitch and at the same time balance the books. And that's why we've not had the fire sale. That's why we didn't accept offers for Jefferson, why John Egan was still with us. We would have probably entertained offers for Sander Berg, but rather than accept the offers we got, we're holding out for what we believe is more value to come out of him. We think there's potential in Brewster. There's young players like in Dyer and places like that. But if we don't get back, the worry, and the worry fans should have of this, is the income last year was 100 million. The wage bill was 60 million. This year, the income will be sort of around about 60 million. And the wage bill will probably be 35, 40 million. Next season, that income will drop 10 million. The season after that, the income in total will probably only be about 15 million or 16 million. And we're running at a wage bill of 35 million. You can understand why this summer it's difficult for us to offer contracts of 1 to 3 years. We can offer one with a hope of getting back in one more go, but we can't offer people the money that they need to, or certainly the class of player we've signed in the past. We can't sign them on 2 and 3 year contracts, because once parachute payments finish, our income before we were promoted was circa £10 million. And this squad we've got at the moment, even with relegation bonus, is probably 30 to 35 million pound wage bill with the overheads as well, and these debts that we've not yet cleared. So you're hoping that before that happens, we clear the debts with transfer fees, still have a competitive budget for playing, But if we don't get there by years 3 and 4 outside the Premier League, then you have to. You have no choice, but you have to transition to a much lower wage bill, and that's maybe some players accepting that, or maybe that we bring in younger players, or maybe we start scouting in the League One like we used to when we were in the Championship.
Yeah, we've definitely been very, very successful in such a short amount of time. Let's move slightly on to something different. United World, how much did we take out for United World?
Well, it wasn't supposed to. We took it out. So what? There isn't full disclosure on United World, because on United World itself, that's actually files accounts outside the UK. In terms of Sheffield United's contribution to it, last year it was £1.6 million. But what fans need to be aware of, that wasn't £1.6 million just to be given to give to Beershot, or given to give to our French clubs or our Indian clubs. There are certain costs that we're buying centrally through United World, predominantly the scouting, the database, the analysis. A lot of fans say, why don't we do a Brentford? Well, we are moving towards that sort of model. We're moving towards that City Group, Brentford type of model. I think Abdullah of United World, when Heckingbottom was appointed, said that we had effectively 800 people on the payroll in one way, shape or form, involved in data analysis, scouting, agents working for us, and just general staff. And they're really scouring the world for players. And it's early days yet. We're scouring players at 13, 14 years old. So it's our contribution to things like insurance that we buy centrally. There's some sponsorship that we do centrally. There's the data analysis. There's the scouts and everything else. So I think whether it would still be 1.6 million if we were buying that software and everything just within the club without the group, we don't know. But it is expensive. Fans will say, well, how can you spend that much money? I mean, Brentford literally have a whole company doing data analysis. On estimates, it costs them about £10 million a year to do what they do in terms of their Moneyball approach to finding players. It is the minimum now, really. And like I said, none of that software cost is actually going through Sheffield United individually. It's going through the whole group for all the clubs to be able to use.
It's interesting with United World, because I think if you're a fan who's only interested in Sheffield United, you probably just look at it and say, well, it doesn't look like the clubs are doing particularly well across the group. At the time of recording, that's a fairly accurate statement. And until I think we see players in red and white who've come through the United World group, there might be a bit of resistance to the model. It might be, as you say, with scouting 13 to 14-year-old players, it might be a while until there are clear evidence on the pitch that this is something that is worthwhile. What would you say to any fans who are very much against United World and really don't want to hear anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. And until they actually see it hit them in the face, I'm not really going to argue too much with them, to be honest with you. I think there's a misunderstanding about United World. Because the previous owner went down a similar route and bought the Chengdu blades, and we've got involved in Hungary and Australia. I think that people just think it's exactly the same, sell a few foreign kits, and there was talk about having academies out there and everything. This is genuinely very different, and it's actually not that unique. There's quite a few clubs now doing this, in like the likes of Watford, Leicester City, obviously Manchester City at the larger end. It is a way of sourcing players. The way I look at it, you see, is Sheffield United's academy needs investing in. The facilities need invested in. The reason we're not investing in it is genuinely not a lack of money. It is actually finding the site and finding some help towards that site. The proof, I think, is in the fact that we're committing to spend significant amounts, both in France and Belgium, to do exactly that, to build academies. Now, those academies, there's a lot of local support for them. There's a lot of council support. There's a lot of public money that's going into those as well. But there's an investment by us as well. Now, I look at that now as there's 3 academies that we're could potentially generate players for Sheffield United, but they're not going to generate players for next year or the year after. They're going to be 7, 8, 9 years. Fans tend to just look at it as, is 𝐍𝐸𝐫𝐝𝐕𝐏𝐍 going to come back and be any good? Or the loan that 𝐍𝐸𝐫𝐶𝐫𝐝 did was a waste of time. It's not really about those loans. They're just a sort of a bit of an add-on. It's about finding players through this scouting network that are generally 14, 15 years old, because by the time they're 20 or 21, we can't compete with Manchester City and Liverpool and Arsenal for those players. Their fees are beyond us. If we'd have not found David Brooks in the Manchester City Academy as a 19-year-old, we'd have never seen him another year, and he would have gone somewhere else. He'd have been playing for the England under 21s, proven himself. The idea of this really is that we can source players through the rest of the world, Africa, Far East and everywhere, sign them into the Middle East club that we have. When they reach a certain age, they can then come into a level like in France or Belgium. And then we're the top of the pyramid and we can take the best players. Now, even if they don't suit English football, it might be that we spot a Ronaldo in Belgium or something like that brings 80, 90 million quid into United World, which we all benefit from. So it doesn't just automatically work. It will need us to find the right players, and we're still competing against other clubs. But I don't really see a downside. If Prince Abdullah was spending his money in supermarkets, we wouldn't be gaining any benefit from that. It's unrealistic to think an owner is just literally going to own the football club and nothing else. And if he owns football clubs, it can only be a benefit to us, really.
Well, time will tell. Thank you for answering that. I just threw that at you. So, final one from me. It's been, as of this time again of recording, something a lot of fans have been talking about because there was some numbers released. But what do you kind of know of agent fees and kind of how much we end up paying?
Well, agent fees, they're an oddity, aren't they? People hate agents' fees. They seem to be a bit of a necessary evil in football now, unfortunately. Yeah, so you did give me a bit of a warning on this. The agents' fees are not actually disclosed in the accounts. So but in terms of the agents' fees, in the current season, so in the window after relegation, so the summer that we took on the loans and this winter where we brought in Mr. Good, who's ended up being not so good, we paid £3 million in agents' fees. So even though we didn't spend a bean on transfer fees, we spent £3 million on agents' fees. Unfortunately, we probably spent some of that agent fees on finding a buyer for Ramsdale, as daft as it probably sounds. But also it reflects that the loan signings were not as cheap as people probably perceive loan signings to be. So there will have been quite a lot of money involved in particularly the Austin and Morgan Gibbs-White deal. I think there was probably less in Ben Davies because there was a willingness on all sides there. That was a sensible move. And Conor Hourihane, I think, was a cheaper deal, but that's £3 million. In the season we're talking about, the second season of the Premier League, we spent £7 million in agents' fees. Now, bear in mind that was only one window because we didn't sign anybody in the January window. So that was the year that we signed Brewster, Bogle, etc., etc. The first year of the Premier League, the two windows where we were very active, we signed a lot of Championship players in the summer, and we signed Sander Berg and 2 foreign loans in the winter. We actually only spent 4 million that year. So it's not necessarily a case of volume or transfer fee involved. It'll be how much competition there is for certain players, what their profile is, and the like. So, yeah, unfortunately, and even if we are really in a situation where we don't get back up and we're offloading players rather than signing players, unfortunately, I don't think that figure is going to be lower because we would probably commission people to go and find a buyer for Sander or for Brewster or whoever.
I don't know about you, Nick. I'm stunned by that.
I did not know that these things happened.
I didn't know that was a thing that existed. You do it on Football Manager, but I didn't know if it was real when you have to look for someone to take a player you don't necessarily want to sell because they're good at football. I mean, that is
Or good at keeping footballs out of the goal.
In terms of this season, we were the third highest spenders in the Championship on agents' fees.
I saw
in the second season in the Premier League, we were the 15th highest spenders on agents' fees.
Oh, Darren, we need to retrain, don't we? And become agents. That's where the money is.
Yeah, I've seen it and done it, and I have to say, I know it's probably hard to get your head around this, but I actually think agents do quite well to earn their money, to be honest with you, in terms of some of the dross that they offload. I mean, I had this conversation before this window. How the hell were we going to get rid of 𝐍𝐸𝐫𝐝? And
come along.
It's more than just sending a video. You do have to go probably and have a few pizzas in Italy and tell them that this guy's a wonder kid and he's great and drives his car brilliantly.
Poor 𝐍𝐸𝐶. If you're watching 𝐍𝐸𝐶, I still love you. And on your day, you can do it, son. Tell you what, I want to be the Burke Whisperer. I want to be the 𝐸𝐸𝐶 Whisperer. Give me 2 weeks with these guys. I will feed them nothing but positivity, and we will get our money back in spades.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you, Darren. And thank you so much for joining us to talk us through the Sheffield United accounts from 2020-21 season. Darren Smith, Sheffield United fan and accountant. We'll do it all over again next year.
My pleasure. Hopefully it'll be a promotion season that we're basing it on.
Promotion.
Yeah, let's hope so. And Darren, I think I'm going to have to go away. I've been listening to you intently, but I think I'm going to have to go away and watch this video 3 or 4 times. I'm sure there's other people out there that will do the same. So
why are you struggling to sleep, Nick?
Cheers, Darren.
Yeah, there's just so much. You just need to take it all in. You just need to understand it all. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, Darren.
No worries.